Hi, I'm Dave Chaplin. I'm here with Crawford Temple, and this is The Compliance Files. In this particular discussion, we're going to talk about disguised remuneration. What's disguised remuneration, Crawford?
Disguised remuneration is where you're paid in a way that perhaps you shouldn't be, or the revenue wouldn't see as compliant with full tax and PAY applied. Probably the one that everyone's heard about would be something like the loan charge, where people were paid through loans and then the revenue said you can't be. So it's those sorts of things. So what we're seeing in the market commonly as a headline are things like advances. We're still seeing loans. You know, what you'll see as a contractor is you'll see something on your payslip that has no tax attached to it.
Now so what should happen is, I mean, the word remuneration is a legal term, isn't it? Remuneration means employment income.
Yep.
So all of that should be taxed, PAYE, employees NI, and employers NI on top, just as anyone who has a salary does. So that's what remuneration is. Disguised is a bit of a strange word, isn't it? I mean...
Well, I think why they chose disguised, I'm not sure, but... what we're seeing now is we're seeing people that aren't even bothering to
just basically
follow a process.
So rather than just them paying you, rather than the person being paid as salary and it's processed as salary and all the right amount of taxes are taken, they say, we're going to pay you in a different way. So have some of it like this and then some of it like this, and here's some Argentinian pesos or... I don't know. There's been all sorts of crazy things over the years, isn't there? Yeah.
But when you look at the original loan chart or the loan schemes, those generally had official documents, loan documents, and it was all signed. Yeah. And they actually made an effort to try and get it right. The fact that ultimately it's been seen as not being right, but there was a significant effort put in by people to try and do it in a way that they felt would work. What we're now seeing in the market is... we've seen advances, and so what's happening is, let's say a worker gets £4,000 in a month.
Yeah.
The provider will say, well, we've paid you £700 in salary, and we've advanced the rest. And what will happen is they'll get a text message that talks about their salary and the advance and what they're taking home in total. Yeah. And their payslip will only show their salary that's been paid.
Yeah. And the rest are just been given with no tax applied to it whatsoever.
Well, the rest they've been given with no tax applied, but also what, from a contractor's perspective, would be no awareness of the revenue that's been given, because all their payslips just show that lower amount.
I remember seeing one of these payslips, and of course they're all different. One of them I think it said taxable advance. There's some other words that are used, which makes it sound like it has been taxed, even though it hasn't been taxed.
Yeah, a lot of them now don't even put it on payslips.
All right.
And the interesting thing behind it is when you say to the worker, what have you signed in your agreement for repayment? There's nothing. They're not even trying to do the paperwork. They're not even trying to do the paperwork. So it's no more than a let's grab a term out the air, stick it next to this money, and just not put it through the tax system. Which, in some cases, I think is probably bordering on fraud the way it's been done.
It does sound like fraud. I mean, that's just...
Yeah.
You can't say something's black when it is white. I mean, it is downright fraud. Are they just hoping not to get caught?
Yeah, I think that what happens is there's a number of providers that understand the complexity that the revenue has in enforcing these things, and typically they'll be running a business model that means they hope to get out before the revenue picks anything up, and they're gone. Problem for the contractor is they're then going to be holding the baby.
They're going to get caught, and we can come on to that probably in another discussion about why they shouldn't get into these things. But for the agencies, they need to understand, even though we've now had the loan charge and all those loan schemes have been cracked down on, and in the past, well, I guess now what's happening is all the contractors are picking up the tax bills for what happened there. But in the new world now, with disguised remuneration and debt transfer and so on, it's the agencies that, if they allow contractors to work through these, I think you call them, don't you? Have I got a good idea for
Yeah.
you schemes? I love that phrase. If they work in those types of things, then it's the agency that can get picked up for this.
Yeah, I think,
and it's quite scary, isn't it?
I think there are some agencies that are even settling loan charge
Really?
payments. Yeah, because they've actually positively recommended a provider to a contractor. And the contractor's got all the documentation to show that, and the contractors are coming back and said, you told me to use this person. So there are agencies that I know have settled some of the loan charge payments made to contractors. The change in legislation, I wrote an article 2.5 years ago that said, depending on how agencies deal with provider compliance will depend on what legislation looks like. If the revenue don't believe that the agencies are dealing with it correctly, then new legislation is just going to put more and more of the liability back to the agency. That's exactly what we've seen.
Yeah.
And what the revenue now understands, and I'm not sure they properly understood it before, is that it's the agency really that controls who the contractors can use.
Yeah.
And so the only way have I got a good idea for you schemes can get to the market is if they convince the recruitment companies to put them on a panel to allow them to be used. And therefore you've got these liability structures that are now coming through.
Well, can an agency say to the contractor, no, you can't use that, or do they have to? If they've got a got a good idea for you scheme, they're using they claim they're an umbrella of some sort. Can the agency just refuse to work with that contractor on that basis, or do they have to?
No, they can refuse to work with a certain provider. They're perfectly entitled to. They can have a contract with anyone. The key thing that's happening is because compliance is moving up the agenda higher and higher.
Yeah, big time.
What's happening is a lot of these schemes, because there are low morals and integrity attached to many of them, they're becoming more and more clever, let's say. I don't like using that word, but they're finding different ways of hiding what they're doing. Yeah, they're finding different ways of hiding what they're doing, and so to keep the integrity of compliance in the market, things that agencies should look for, classic sign that in every instance we've come across it, this is what happens. An agency will allow a contractor to use a certain provider. And then in a very short space of time and for no apparent reason, they've suddenly got a high volume of workers using that provider. And that is probably the biggest sign that something is not quite right. And what we say to the agencies is, you can come to Professional Passport. Whether a provider is approved or not is irrelevant. Come to Professional Passport, email us, gather information, interview some of the workers, get whatever information you can, send it to us, and we will try and help you work out what's going on and then help you resolve that issue and get the contractors out of it.
There was a consultation recently, wasn't there, launched? I believe it's closed now, about disguised remuneration and what could be done in terms of regulation of umbrella companies. And all the compliant umbrellas want regulation to come in so that happens. And I didn't actually respond to that consultation. I bet you did, because this is your zone. Because if I had done, it would have been one line, which was, don't let the buggers get their hands on the money. Because that's the best way to do it, isn't it? Now, it seems the way to do that now is agencies just have to be responsible for this. And if they're not responsible, do they now need to understand that they're going to be picking up these bills and it won't always be the contractor?
Potentially they are. And that's one of the reasons why the agencies and end clients are now saying you've got to have a recognised accreditation stamp of compliance against a provider. But that doesn't end there. We've got to keep a vigilant eye. We've seen providers who have maybe had a good track record in the marketplace, and post-COVID, because of business pressures and everything else, have launched models that you just go, why on earth are you doing that? And so the market is constantly changing and evolving. And the problem with all of these things is the size of the marketplace, because what you see is if a non-compliant provider can get a foothold somewhere, you will see massive traction happen very, very quickly. So they are able to make a lot of money very quickly and then get out of the market. But of course, when the revenue picks it up, then the agency is going to have to demonstrate what they've done before dealing with that contractor to have any chance of the revenue not coming after them.
Well, you've got the Criminal Finances Act
Yeah,
now, right?
there's lots of stuff.
I mean, that's quite a high bar, isn't it, for the revenue to prove someone has been fraudulent, or I don't know what the words are in the Criminal Finances Act. It's not quite as scary as everyone thinks, but I mean, there's certain things agencies should be doing, and if they don't meet that level of standard,
it's all around
they
whether
could get
it's
hit.
tax evasion. If it's tax evasion is the key trigger. The problem is that recruitment companies have in the past just had an A4 questionnaire that they send out to a provider.
Yeah,
and the problem
yeah.
with the non-compliant providers is they know what the right answers are.
Yeah.
So they give you the right answers, but that doesn't mean that's what they're doing. Because if you think about it, they're ignoring the rules, doing what they want anyway. So why are they going to give you the right answers?
Yeah.
So it's a very close communication between the recruitment companies, the compliance standards, because if they share stuff with us where they've got concerns, if we got approached by that company because the agency said we're not going to deal with you anymore, then we would know what they're doing in the past and we can shortcut and just say, no, thank you very much. So I think the market's got to get closer and closer to at working together on these things and sharing the intel. And we're more than happy to help recruitment companies if they think there's something untoward going on and they can't get to the bottom of it. It's our world. We live in it every day. And very quickly we'll probably be able to work out what's going on because that's what we're facing all the time. And some of them are just, it is just fraudulent stuff that's going on.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, you can have all the regulation in the world, but if someone wants to commit fraud, they just will.
Yeah, I think the point we made to the revenue in our response to disguised remuneration, and this is what a lot of people, particularly recruitment companies, maybe haven't joined up because the revenue haven't been using it, is the recruitment companies now submit their intermediary reporting every quarter. And that says, here's all the workers.
That's been around for years, though, hasn't it, that intermediary reporting?
That came in about 2000 and, blimey, test me now. But yeah, it's been around for a few years.
It's been around a good few years.
Yeah.
And each month they have to...
Each quarter,
is it? They have to give... It's a spreadsheet, isn't it? They have to send in, I think.
Effectively.
Of a list of all their contractors or limited companies or whoever they've paid and how much.
And how much they've paid and then who they're paying. So if there's an umbrella company, they have to provide the details of the umbrella company. So the revenue has got from the recruitment company every single person that's been paid and how much they've been paid.
Is that all recruitment companies across the UK have to do this, regardless of size?
Yeah.
So the revenue's got all the information of who's worked through an umbrella company, not who's worked through an agency, who they paid, if there's an intermediary, an umbrella or whatever, and how much.
Yeah.
All right.
And then what you've got on the other side of that is you've got RTI. And
RTI stands for?
Real-time information.
Okay.
So when you're paid through PAYE, what you now have to do is what the person who's paying you has to do is report that in real time to the revenue. On or before you get paid, they've got to make the submission.
That was part of the whole making tax difficult thing, wasn't it?
I think that was what the phrase was.
Is that what it's called?
Something like that. So what you've now got is they've got, if you've got Umbrella A, and you can pull Umbrella A out from all the intermediary reporting that shows there are these 50 workers who've each been paid £2,000.
Might not just be an umbrella, it could be an agency that's just paying someone. It could be anyone paying.
But what you can then do is look at the RTI for those workers and say, does that look right? And and the point we made in the disguised remuneration consultation is I don't believe it's further legislation that's required, because all the further legislation allows is someone in the government to stand up and say, look what we're doing, we've imposed all this legislation. We've said for probably the best part of 15 years that the key part in all of this is enforcement. And the bit that stands out to me more than anything is if you're a commercial business, management information is king. And how you understand the management information, interpret it to develop and design and grow your business is critical. Those that do it well, do well. Well, if you think about it, the revenue's got all the management information. They've got every payment that an agency is sending to someone and where they're sending it. And they've got all the RTI returns for those companies that receive those payments.
So they have the contractor's tax number or the limited company number.
PAY reference number. They
know who the directors are of the limited companies if it's outside IR35.
Yeah, but if you look at the PAY reference and they match the two and say, right, this worker on this PAY, this worker here, does it equal or look to be about right? And you could identify all the schemes.
That'd be easy.
Yeah.
That'd be easy.
But I don't believe it's being proactively used.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're trying to do is agree a way in which when any provider is seeking a compliance accreditation, what we want to be able to do is have an agreement with the revenue where the provider gives us permission to go to the revenue, so the revenue can do that analysis on that provider before they get a compliance accreditation.
Yeah.
And if it's outside of agreed parameters, they would fail our compliance standard.
Yeah.
And that.
So you've got GDPR type issues going on there, haven't you, with personal data and so on?
No, because we wouldn't have any personal data. The revenue's got all the personal data.
What are you going to send them then? A tax?
We would send them a company registration and PAYE reference for
Yeah.
that provider.
Yep.
They could then see all the agencies that are paid and all the workers,
okay.
look at the RTI, check
Yeah.
it, and all we'd say is tell us if it's over 90% or 95% or whatever the number was.
Yeah.
And they'd say the relationship between the two meets the standard or fails to meet the standard.
Okay. So is it because the ones that are not operating compliantly and using the "have I got good idea for you" stuff, the agency's paying this particular scheme, and then, well, I think that example was £4,000, wasn't it, a month, and then they're putting 700 through or 800 through salary, and the rest is just taxable advance. Doesn't make sense. Yeah, just
tax-free advance.
Tax-free advance, right?
Yeah.
But that won't appear on that contractor's tax record.
No, so you've got correct, and you've
Or is
got
that even a further step?
You've got agencies who will say to providers, "We want a copy of the payslips," and we've seen agencies provided payslips that are just fictitious. They're not what's been put through. They're not correct. And contractors, and we're going to do a session, I think, specifically on this for contractors.
Yeah.
But there's things they can do to check that the information the revenue's getting is what they think. But from the recruitment company point of view, because there's no real definition of umbrella, a lot of these companies will just call themselves an umbrella.
Yeah.
The recruitment company believes they're paying the correct amount of money to the umbrella,
Yeah.
believes that's all being taxed and put through,
Yeah.
and has got no idea that it's not.
Yeah.
And it's only if they get a concerned worker or some other information that flags this concern that they may be aware of it. And so in their eyes, they're not doing anything wrong. But the issue that I have is that the revenue has all the data.
Yeah.
And if you look at something like self-assessment, where you fully disclose on self-assessment, the revenue has to open an inquiry if there's something they don't like on that within a 12-month period from submission.
That takes years.
Yeah,
well, it can do.
Unless they make discovery, which is you haven't disclosed something. So the bit for me is, if the revenue want to raise the bar on identified disguised remuneration and enforcing it, I think the only piece of legislation they should put in as an update would be to require the revenue to carry out these formal checks, and if it's shown that they had all the information to identify the scheme, and didn't take action within 12 months to open an inquiry, then I don't think they should be able to go back to the worker and recover the tax from the worker. I think in all cases it should go back into the supply chain, either the provider or if the agency or end client can't demonstrate due diligence, back up. Because the problem is the contractors aren't informed and will go through the detail of it.
They don't know.
So
those 50,000 people caught in the loan charge, I mean, there'll be some of them in there that knew exactly what they were doing and were trying it on, but there wasn't 50,000 of them all thinking that. There's nurses, social workers who haven't got a clue about tax and how it works.
And they believe the assurances given by the providers, and they're very good at giving those assurances. They don't understand what a barrister's opinion really means, which is nothing at the end of the day. It's an opinion.
I'm not sure I'd go that far, but it is an opinion.
It's an opinion.
Yeah.
So, and it depends on the questions that are asked and how they're framed and what's been asked to be reviewed.
Yeah.
A barrister's opinion does mean something, but what the protection it actually gives is not to the worker. It gives the directors of the limited company protection. From the workers coming after them.
I mean, one of the things that actually I find frustrating is some of the rhetoric that's come out of the Treasury around the loan charge and to support the loan charge, which is this: if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Well, lots of these schemes, they don't look too good to be true because the contractor's just looking at the take-home pay. And the take-home pay isn't that much different compared to maybe what they'd get through a normal umbrella company that's compliant. It might be a little bit more. For some of them, they're getting ridiculous returns. Some of them are crazy returns, right?
Are significantly more.
Some of them aren't significantly
No, I agree
more,
with
and
that.
it's the dodgy scheme that's running off with the tax to British Virgin Islands or wherever they're going. So that isn't helpful rhetoric, because sometimes a contractor, it won't look too good to be true. So I think I like your idea of there's just a summation done, a check, isn't there? There's
Correlation of two bits of data.
I mean,
to see if it equals
you
a
can
number.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't strike me as something that's particularly difficult for them
No,
to
and
do.
there's no personal data.
Catches it in real time as well. Every month you
Every
catch
quarter,
it on
every quarter they'll
Yeah.
be able to catch it. And at the end of the day, what they could then do, where they identified those proactively, I know the revenue is looking to write to contractors where they believe they may well be in some disguised remuneration
They
scheme.
would just run out. They would run off immediately. They wouldn't.
Yeah,
They would
but
just
at
stop.
the minute,
Yeah.
the revenue are sending letters out. So I got a letter saying that I was in some scheme that was doing advances and loans. I've never been in a loan or advance scheme. So they are just hitting people.
Yeah, just confetti with just hoping for the best.
Whereas you could really pinpoint it.
Yeah,
Therefore,
yeah,
and that's, from a revenue point of view, if those letters were done in the right way, you would have a number of those workers who would phone up and supply information and help the revenue inquiry, rather than the way they currently do it, which is we're coming after you for all this money, which basically sends everyone into a flat spin and underground.
Indeed. So what we're going to say then to agencies about disguised remuneration and making sure things stay compliant, I think our key message is use a preferred suppliers list, an approved suppliers list, and work with accredited companies like Professional Passport.
Yes, but also watch for any company that seems to be gaining traction with no explanation behind it, because people change.
That's great. That was David Crawford talking about disguised remuneration, and that was the compliance files. Please fill in your comments below the video.